hear me speak about this subject too. But I'm not a language expert in the sense that I cannot give you any solutions about how second language can be taught, whether it's Kannada, Sanskrit, or English, right? But what I can do is reflect on why there is this fear of language amongst us. I think there is a fear of language, which is very peculiar when you contrast it with our natural polyglottism, right? We are polyglots. When I came to Bangalore, what I really found very nice, very wonderful is that everyone spoke at least 3 languages. That is, apart from English and Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, and Kannada was practically everyone had some knowledge of it, right? And Hindi, of course, because it was a national language. English, of course, everyone had to learn. And that's really, we should take pride in the fact that we are natural polyglots. And there is a kind of misconception that creativity only manifests itself in your mother tongue, which is proved wrong by many of the Kannada writers. They all actually, quite a few of them they have mother tongue which is either Telugu or Tamil, but they took to language because in the beginning of the 20th century or in the first 2-3 decades, it was an extraordinarily live scenario. They took to the Kannada because there was really creative thinking going on in the language. So we want that situation to repeat here, not by government enforcing you to learn Kannada because there is no other way people are going to take to Kannada, but because you want to say, oh, what is going on in Kannada? If I don't know what's going on in Kannada, I must be missing out on something. But nobody thinks that way. How many really, do you think people would really take kindly to Kannada if you are sort of forced to take to Kannada? Everyone complains. I have a wife who's a Bengali. She says, I can't get around the city because I can't still read the. So you can say, why can't you come and read Kannada? That's a strange demand to make because we are, the fact is that I spent 5 years in Calcutta. Nobody made any demands on me. They too are proud of their language, but the thing is that we move between cities, move between languages, right? So this model that there is a mother tongue, there is a state language, and there is a national language, and so on. There was a particular reason, of course, why India adopted that model, but that model may have been very distorting in some same strange way. Right now, there is a kind of a Hindi nationalism. I was told that there was a meeting in Chennai where our current human resource minister insisted on speaking in Hindi, making a point in Tamil Nadu, because Tamil Nadu is, anti-Hindi, as you all know. But I feel this sort of a nationalism and sub-nationalism, really the negative part of nationalism, is what creates this fear of language. And that gets superimposed on an older fear, right? I don't know many of you, how many of you are here are Kannada speakers or read Kannada literature. There is this very distinguished writer called Purnachandra Tejasvi, who is the son of Kuvempu, our great writer. So Purnachandra Tejasvi, in his autobiography, mentions how he was scared of English when he was a student in Mysore, and his father was a vice chancellor in Mysore, and he failed in English. I think he failed in a couple of times, if I remember the narrative correctly. And then finally, the third time, he thought he has really put in enough effort to pass. And when he again failed, obviously his father was very upset. He was an extremely literate man, who was equally conversant, fluent in English and in Kannada. So he wanted to know what is happening. And this time Tejasvi says, no, Anna, there's some mistake there. I think, I really passed. So as a vice chancellor, he gets the paper, taken up and gets examined again. It turns out that actually it deserves less marks than it actually got on the paper. So it's just that there is this fear, and it is not clear why there should be this fear about English. And I've seen this in many people, right? But that was a different fear in some sense. That is a fear created by a language of the colonizers, if you like, I think. And when it was taught, and a certain association came with it, certain pressures came with it, right? And that's why when Purnachandra Tejasvi became one of the most wonderful writers later, and in a peculiar way, in his writing, he wanted to bring the world to Kannada, right? I mean, he had this very encyclopedic knowledge. Even his famous novel, Carvalho, is all about a scientist and so on, right? So he something that he was denied in his fear of English, he was trying to do it in Kannada. That is, in some sense, you can overcome the fear only when you realize that, you know, each language brings a word, right? In its own distinctive way. But in each language, there is no such thing as a, you know, unequal languages or inferior languages, right? Each language is capable of accessing the world, you know, in its richness. But the problem was that earlier during the colonial imposition of English, you had this fear of English, right? And later on, now of course, when people demand to learn English, it's not because it's a colonizer's language. Now it's a perceived opportunity. Everyone wants to read English. There is absolutely no reason why they should not, right? But we need to think about how we can access the world in all the languages that we have. That is, only when Telugu or Kannada or Tamil become equally generative, if you like, where an English speaker will say, oh, well, I want to see what is going on in Kannada. I want to, you know, in the way that we do so we want to learn French because we want to access French philosophy. Or when I was in Jain, you know, I was bored of history and I wanted to do philosophy there, and I wanted to learn German because I wanted to read Heidegger and the German philosophers in the original. In the same way, there's such richness in these languages that people would want to come and access this richness. But today the situation is such that creativity has gone missing, and that's a debate that you see often among Kannada intellectuals, Telugu intellectuals, that where is the creativity in our languages? What has taken the creativity out of our languages? Now we need to answer this question in order for us to ask much more, you know, humdrum question of what we do in the classroom. That is, why is it that, you know, second language teaching has become such a, well, students are indifferent, teachers don't, you know, we have a litany of complaints, right? Students don't take to it, and teachers haven't been really, you know, putting in an effort and so on. But I think there is something far more fundamental that's gone wrong. That is, we need to rethink what sort of a philosophy of education we need to have. That is, we need to introspect. Why is it? It's not that, you know, there's nothing wrong in really saying that we want English. You know, there is a kind of ambivalence that is manifested by many of the Kannada writers. You know, when they speak to the Kannada audience, they will say, well, we should all emphasize Kannada, the state should encourage Kannada, and so on. And in fact, this whole thing of trying to give the status of classical language to, you know, Tamil, to Kannada and Telugu, and now all the other languages are demanding it. It's obviously, you know, in some sense a political game, trying to say that, look, let's also get some resources from the state about, you know, about our languages, as though classifying a language as classic really change anything, right? But we need to look more deeply about why is it that the world is not being made accessible through these languages. That if the world is not accessible in Kannada, if the world is not become accessible to us in Malayalam or in Telugu, then there is something is the matter. Right? So in our philosophy of education, we need now to rethink whether we follow this model of saying that, look, we'll teach Hindi because it's national language, we'll teach, you know, Sanskrit because our ancient language, and rethink some other model where, of course, we need to, as I said, the natural polyglottism, where all of us have no difficulty in picking up so many languages from the street, right? We have no fear there. But when you come to the classroom, when you come to the institutional pedagogic structures, there is a fear. And that fear is what is preventing the second languages from becoming a site of excitement. People don't know why it's being taught. It's become a drudgery, right? So the only way that we can in the long term, I'm not saying that it's in a single classroom or a single university. In the long term, the only way we can make that space alive is by returning to thinking about why languages are very important to us and why the multiplicity of language is really what we should be encouraging. See, one of the a really negative aspect of this linguistic nationalism is, Indian states were divided according to the language, right? It was a completely arbitrary divide, as many of you might know if you know a little bit of history. In fact, Madras could very well have become the capital of Andhra Pradesh. There's absolutely no reason why it became the capital of Tamil Nadu, right? Because there's so many Telugu speakers in Andhra Pradesh. And similarly, I think those who would consider as Kannada speakers in Bangalore would probably about 25% or less, and so the only harm that this nationalism has done is to promote the kind of a movement which is exclusive, which says that everything other than this should be excluded, right? But why that exclusion? Language was never a mark of identity for Indians. Everyone grew up with any number of languages and used whatever language you needed. So we need to go back to that model which allows us greater flow between languages and greater exchange of creativity between languages. So these are not, of course, this can't answer the nitty-gritty questions that we will face in our classrooms, but this can maybe go towards how we rethink our curriculum there. Often we think that language has to do with, of course, language has to do with good writing and good speaking and so on, and that's why most of the second language texts tend to have literature, right? But maybe let's rethink that. Let's try to have philosophy. Let's try to have maybe management in this, because not everyone is interested in reading a literature, right? I mean, some of you may be interested in reading Kuvempu, but others might be equally interested in a very interesting article that has come in economics. Why not try and have an economics article in Kannada? This is the point I'm trying to make, is that one of the deprivations that these languages suffered, and what I mean by that, they don't access the language in the same way as English does, is that there's no thinking about economics or thinking about social sciences in Kannada or in these other vernacular languages. So you're forced to actually go to the modernist writers or Navya writers as your model of writing. Not everyone is interested in that. So make the classroom far more interesting by incorporating in the curriculum other things that students would want to enjoy, right? After all, language gets spoken over different domains. It's not simply literature that you want to know, right? Language is alive. New words come up when you deal with different domains, not when you're simply trying to refine one word, right? It's because English now is a global language that there is such a thing as now as an Indian English, and Dr. Krishnan is right in one way, because wonderful writing has come out from India, right? But that's because it reflects an Indian experience. It is not a borrowed experience of the British or the Americans. When Amitav Ghosh writes Shadow Lines, he's reflecting on his experience here with English, and that's why that English doesn't stick out in the way that earlier English sort of stuck out when the earlier writers used to write in this very Victorian prose, that is now alien to us, right? But that can happen only when language becomes more dynamic, right? So my suggestion for thinking, and that's a keynote, if you like, that I'm going to strike here, that I hope gets picked up in all the other workshops, is that let's look to the philosophical justification for why languages are included in the curriculum. Rather than immediately go to the nitty-gritty, let's deepen our reflections about why we need language learning, right? And how can we change the curriculum of these textbooks in such a way that the classroom somehow becomes more alive and more contemporaneous, that it allows people to say, well, I can participate in this discourse either in Kannada or in Hindi or in Telugu. That English becomes one more option, if you like. It's like if you go to Europe, now there are many people who are multilingual. Even the most provincial French are now saying that we need English, right? But there is a kind of multilingualism there. People speak 2-3 languages, participate in the universe in 2-3 languages, right? So we would like to see, next time, Mr. Sudarshan speaking in a different language about management. That would be when we have achieved, vibrancy in our languages. right? Whereas now, the jargon is not available, right? Let's say even things like, we're looking for a vendor and so on, you will probably say vendor, right? You won't look for the Kannada term or the Telugu term, right? And when you start translating it, it often doesn't work. But if you begin to actually think in those languages, right? And these domains are actually thought about in that language, then there won't be any problem. English will be one more options that you have, which you use, but it doesn't have any privilege, nor do the other languages suffer in the same way. Okay, this is a sort of general theme that I want to suggest as a keynote, as a philosophical rethinking about why language is important to us and how we might rethink the study and teaching of languages. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now request Professor N.V.H. Krishnan to present our token of gratitude towards Vivek, sir. Harmony is the beautiful balance between mind, body, and soul, measured in tender, peaceful moments. Thanking causes such harmony to set in. I request Ms. Jyoti V. from PG Department of Commerce, Jain University, to deliver the word of thanks.
It's my privilege to propose vote of thanks on this auspicious occasion. I, on behalf of School of Commerce and Management Studies, Jain University, and the entire team of the two-day national conference on winning with VUCA innovation and strategies, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all dignitaries and delegates from various institutions and corporates for gracing the occasion. I thank Dr. Chenraj Roychan, Chairman, Jain Group of Institutions and President, Jain University Trust, Dr. N. Sundarajan, Vice Chancellor, Jain University, and Dr. Ishwaran Iyer, Dean Commerce and Management, Jain University in absentia. Now I take the privilege to thank our guest of honor, Professor N.V.H. Krishnan, Registrar, Jain University, for his gracious presence and enlightening words. I express my gratitude to Dr. B.T. Venkatesh, Controller of Examinations, Jain University. I would also like to thank our guest of honor, Mr. Ashwin Alija, Founder and Managing Director, iNurture Education Solutions, Private Limited, and his entire team for gracing the occasion. It's my privilege to thank Mr. Anand Sudarshan, Founder and Director, Sylvant Advisors Private Limited, for the keynote address on winning with VUCA, innovations and strategies. I express my gratitude to Dr. Vivek Dhareshwar, Head Shrishti School of Art, Design and Technology, for the keynote address on rethinking language teaching in India. I thank all the office bearers of Jain University and principals of other JGI. I also thank Dr. Rajdeep K. Manwani for the welcome address and Dr. Trayambaka for an overview. Thank you, one and all.
Audience, please note, we thank our Registrar and Controller of Examinations for being a part of this and gracing the occasion and supporting us throughout. I request Vasu sir to thank Mr. Ashwin Ajila, Founder and Managing Director, iNurture Education Solutions Private Limited. We now break for tea. I request all the people present here to have tea in second floor, and then I request language participants to kindly head according to the rooms that I am listing out now. Sanskrit 610 on 6th floor, Kannada 614 again in 6th floor, English 606 in 6th floor. You will have volunteers who can help you with that. Hindi participants will head to ground floor. I request all the commerce and management participants to kindly come back to conference hall, where we'll have plenary session 1 moderated by Mr. Matthew Anthony very shortly. Thank you.